Hello everybody, this is a very quick review of hand of the day number 32. So as a quick recap, we're holding a weak pocket pair and then we're deciding to donk on this flop. We decide to go for a big turnover bet against a straightforward passive reg, and then we're deciding to go for a river bluff. So this is a player who has a very straightforward play style and is likely multi-tabling. And they are not a fan of making tough bluffs or river calls, or hero calls, sorry. Okay, so according to the poll, almost everybody voted to check, which I think is quite interesting, but two people did decide to go all in. The main reason why people decided to vote to check is because they suspect that the turn calling range is going to be very strong, and therefore it's just going to be very difficult to have any fold equity on the river. And there is a little bit of truth to this, but I just want to go over a few things to really fully discuss it. Starting off with a very small amount of theory, note that small blind is able to donk on a lot of ace-high boards in small blind versus button. The reason why is because small blind is very condensed towards these top pairs, and they just have a very condensed range overall against button's very, very wide range that has a lot of weak hands. Donking on ace-high boards does not occur versus early position opens, because there the pre-flop opening range is going to be far more condensed towards those stronger hands, which small blind should not have due to 3-betting. So here, the turn usually plays out polar, as you might expect, because the weaker ace-highs are just going to prefer to check, and then the strongest hands just want to build the pot as quickly as possible, as efficient as possible. I think it would prefer to use 200% pot if I were to give it this option, but I only gave it 150 and then 250, so this is what we're going with. And what's really important to understand is button's defending threshold against this turn overbet. You can see that they're mostly condensed towards sets and two pairs, but some top pairs definitely still have to call just to approximate MDF somewhat. Now, we understand that this is going to be a player who is very foldy, and they will not like to call with their weaker top pairs. So already we can definitely eliminate those from their range. Two pairs might also start to fold, especially if it's something like 10-7 and it happens to be a very foldy player, but I think it's fair enough to keep most of those hands in the range, and I think most people agreed with me there as well. If we head over here, that's what I aimed to do with the node lock. I maybe should have node locked it a little bit more aggressively, but I just got button to fold most of their top pairs in the spot, and instead call with two pairs plus, which is how I think this player type will aim to play. And in both river spots, in the node locked one and in the GTO one, you'll see that two pairs will be indifferent, and the amount of two pairs that have to call really just depends on the calling range coming into the river. Obviously, if the range is stronger, then fewer of those hands have to call, but they will be the indifference points on this board because they are the bulk of the calling range on the turn. This is the main hand class. And then I think whether you want to bluff or not really depends on how you think people are going to play their two pairs. For this, we can use intuition or we could use some data. I like to use a combination of both. So from the data, there is a general pattern that people will overfold less on rivers if you use bigger bet sizes on turns, but the extent of this pattern I think is it's a bit less than many players might expect. So I think a lot of people would expect that river spots are going to be extremely overcalled if you use a big turn overbet, but it's not the case, because this river overbet is going to apply a lot of pressure to these types of hands like two pairs, which people will definitely call against turn bets at least sometimes, and then struggle to defend on the river because they suspect they're going to be up against hand like sets, etc. I think in practice people might fold 10-7 and they might call a bit more with ace-10, ace-7, perhaps with some perceived value domination or perhaps with better blockers in their mind. Although actually 10-7 probably is going to be a lot better because we don't hold pocket aces ever, but at the very least we should have some pocket 10s here. And I think it's a very tough spot. It's a very close one, but foldy regs just have the tendency to overfold in almost all spots when you take a step back and you look at the data. If a spot happens to be defended more closely to Nash, foldy regs will tend to overfold that spot in a variety of situations where you would not expect them to. I think that bluffing here is actually probably going to be a little bit better for this reason, but it can vary greatly on the player type. And I unfortunately did not provide, well, fortunately, I suppose, because I do like to keep these a little bit vague, but I did not provide specific information as to whether this villain happens to be extremely foldy or if they're just a little bit foldy. As a default, I think bluffing is going to be okay. The only problem is that when you do the asymmetry of assumptions, you do get into a situation where it's going to be fairly negative EV if they happen to overcall and if our assumption happens to be wrong, but it's only going to be slightly plus EV if they overfold because there aren't too many hands in their range that they really could overfold with. I don't think people are going to be folding with straights or sets, no matter how passive or foldy they are. So if you're not sure, I think checking is the best option. If you suspect this is a foldy player, definitely don't be afraid to bluff here. You want to bluff foldy players off of hands, and you do have the option to bluff again on the river, even after using a big overbet on the turn like we did in this hand. I hope you guys enjoyed the analysis, and I will see you in the next one.